Are mammograms as safe and effective as we've been led to believe? And what's the alternative? It's coming up next on Long Island Naturally. Hi, welcome to Long Island Naturally. I'm Mary Musi. The American Cancer Society says that if you're a woman over 40 years old, you should get a mammogram every year. But critics charge there's no solid evidence that mammograms are more effective than self-exams at saving lives. Others say the radiation exposure and painful compression may lead to more cancer. So are there effective alternatives? And how do you know what's right for you? We'll talk to a holistic gynecologist and an integrative physician about their ideas on breast cancer screening. They'll also share their recommendations to help prevent breast cancer. But first, a few years ago, I reported on a study conducted by a Cornell University clinician on digital infrared computer scans for breast cancer detection. Here's that story.
They take your breast and they throw it on the slab and they squeeze you.
Mammograms can be painful, but Doris Salazar gets one every 6 months. That's because she's a breast cancer survivor.
Now relax.
She's also a technician for an entirely different kind of scanning device. No squeezing here. This machine uses infrared photography to detect the increased blood supply that feeds cancerous tumors. You're looking at an infrared picture of my face. This is the same technology used by the military for night vision. Not only is it pain-free, but a new study shows that for some women, this device may be superior to mammograms.
Theoretically, you'd be able to find a cancer earlier, perhaps before it be seen on mammogram or ultrasound.
Dr. Raishi Simmons has just finished a clinical trial that compared the Sentinel breast scan to mammography.
Mammograms are just not as sensitive as we'd like for them to be. And this technology may be better than mammograms in young women with very dense breast tissue to be able to find a cancer early.
The computer compares your scan to that of known positive or patients who have known breast cancers. It is invaluable with respect to screening in those women who aren't going to go for screening otherwise. That's a big population.
Dr. Simmons' study won't be published until next year. Meanwhile, hundreds of Long Island women have already drawn their own conclusions.
This is amazing. I believe in this 100%.
Everybody should encourage their doctors to get this technology in their office.
We need to take a break, but we'll be back with your options for breast cancer screening, so please stay tuned. Hi, welcome back to Long Island Naturally. As you may recall, last year a task force suggested that women in their 40s are too young to benefit from mammography because the risk versus benefit ratio was not a positive one. But the outcry from women's groups was so loud that in the end there was no change in the recommendation. So what can we say for sure about mammograms, and what are the alternatives? My guests are here to help answer those questions. Dr. Moshe Deckel is a holistic gynecologist from Oceanside. He believes that women have the opportunity to protect their breasts from cancer with a good diet, exercise, and the right supplements. Also joining us is Dr. Chris Calipay, an integrative physician from East Meadow and Plainview. He's always looking for a better way. They've joined forces to make thermography more accessible to more women. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Now, I'm calling it thermography, but actually, thermography is a 30-year-old term. Today, it's really digital infrared
Thermography.
computerized, right? That's
It's a completely different, mechanism from many years ago, whereas the device was far less specific and accurate. And today, the accuracy and the sensitivity is very high. It's 90%. It's more accurate than the sensitivity that's coming from mammography.
Actually, each image that we take has about 75,000 pixels. That means 75,000 bits of information as far as temperature conversion into a digital image, so we can see much more accurately what the findings are and give a very good risk analysis.
Okay, Dr. Deckel, tell me again, what is it that you detect on a digital infrared scan?
What we detect is actually a risk analysis. That's what it is. We see if there are any areas that are increased in vascularity.
Meaning blood vessels.
Blood vessels. And also we see areas that are, let's say, increased inflammation. In other words, when we see an area which on one breast is hotter than the other, that's an issue that we have to further investigate.
Okay. Dr. Calipay, what role do you think this digital infrared screening should play in breast cancer detection?
I think it's a brilliant idea for many reasons. The fact that there is no risk to your body whatsoever, no uncomfortable compression of breast tissue, no radiation exposure. The sensitivity is very high, so if it says that there's an abnormality there, there's a very good chance of it being there. If there says there's no abnormality, there's an excellent chance there's no abnormality there. With breast cancer, it's a scenario that involves genetic mutation that occurs at the DNA helix. You remember the coiled DNA helix? And as your body can't fix the damage to the DNA in many cases, the cell starts to divide and multiply and make its own reproduced, 100% reproduced cells to become dysfunctional in that tissue. Those cells can stimulate vascular endothelial growth factor to allow blood vessels to come to feed the cell. And that's the bad part about almost all cancers, because they need to be fed more blood flow. They need more sugar to grow, and this has been documented. So we don't want those cells to do that. But when they do get new blood vessels to come to them, there's more of a heat that's able to be detected by this device. So this can pick up abnormalities 10 years before mammography, and that's been documented in many studies.
Well, actually, Dr. Raishi Simmons said that in my interview with her 3 years ago, although the American Cancer Society still says it's on its website that the technology is still too new and there have not been enough studies. I guess they don't feel comfortable recommending it to women.
There are 800 studies that have been done on over 300,000 women that have been in these studies. And
there are 800 studies?
Yes.
But not in the U.S.?
U.S. and other countries.
Oh, really?
Yep.
There's a very big study in France, Dr. Gauthier, that followed 10,000 women. This was about 20 years ago, and shows specifically that this is about 90% accuracy with doing thermography.
Even with the older version of the technology?
Correct.
Wow.
This is about 50-year-old technology. This is not new.
Oh, it's 50 years old, okay. What happens if a digital scan indicates there is new blood vessel growth? Does that necessarily mean a woman is developing cancer?
No, it's absolutely not. This shows that possibly it could be an inflammatory issue. When I see an abnormality on thermography, this is far from saying you have a breast cancer. I combine it with physical examination, and then considering the fact that thermography is really a physiological study, then I'll get help by doing an anatomical study, either by using an ultrasound or an MRI, which will give me more data and diagnosing or giving the patient exact understanding of where she stands.
Okay, I'm sure our viewers are wondering how come they hardly ever hear about this technology. I mean, I've been doing stories for 4 or 5 years now, but other than my efforts, I don't know how many people are really reporting on it. Why is it not in the media more?
Well, the existing mechanism that's in place with mammography has been there for so long, And a lot of the people that believe in mammography think that there's a significant benefit to risk ratio. They're saying it's an assumed 20, 15, 25% benefit by doing mammography because you might catch a cancer and save someone's life, but it's a little bit fuzzy on those numbers, and it's something that's been established, so it's hard for, I think, that establishment to give up to adapt a whole new mechanism and technology. But, you know, research goes on and progress continues, and the more that we see that these things are safe and accurate to do, these should really be brought into the mainstream.
Now, the American Cancer Society says that the X-ray exposure from a mammogram is perfectly safe, even if a woman starts at age 40 and continues on through her life. And yet, I know that there are critics who are very concerned about the X-ray exposure. In fact, Dr. Epstein of the University of Illinois, he's a professor emeritus there of public health. He says that women 40 to 50 should never get a mammogram. What is your feeling about that?
Well, let's start with the fact that there's no safe limit of radiation. Any kind of radiation is not good for us, number one. Number two, it's accumulative. So the more we have, the worse it is. But also there are other procedures like chest x-rays, CAT scans, etc. So everything goes together and continues to move the needle towards the red zone.
So you're saying it's not just necessarily the mammogram, it's the fact that we're all getting scanned all the time for various things.
Well, there are studies that say when they looked at women who are under 50 years of age that had the genetic predisposition, the BRCA gene, and it's been recommended that even in their 20s and 30s they start doing mammography yearly, that the estimated lifetime risk of developing a cancer from the radiation is higher in the younger women than it is in the women who are 50 and considerably older. So the comments now coming out in research say that it's not necessarily a good idea to have these mammographies done every year in your young ages, because the risk of increasing the risk for breast cancer from the radiation is higher than in those women who are older. So that's an important caution. And we were talking about this before. God forbid you're a cardiac patient and you're a woman, you've gone for your mammography, you have a couple of chest x-rays, or you went into the hospital, you had an angiogram, an ultra-fast CAT scan.
These are all
of
X-ray
these things are giving you significant exposure. Now, going back to the Hiroshima bomb, they knew radiation existed around that, and they've known that doctors that over years have done fluoroscopies, even years past, they did more than they really needed to do. That increased the risk of cancers to breast and other tissues. So they've looked at radiation exposure for all sorts of different types, and we're worried that adding more radiation now, much more than years ago, from the environment, the ambient environment, and some of these medical tests, is a big risk.
Also, there's a subset of women who carry a gene abnormality, it's called the AT gene, that increases their sensitivity to X-rays.
Oh, really?
About 4 times more. So in other words, and it's about 1 to 2%, but we don't know, we don't check for it. So if our patient is one of those who carry those genes, and now she has a higher risk by multiplied times 4, it adds up. And again, according to some studies, every time we do mammography, we increase our chance by 1 to 2% per study. And I have patients who do it every 6 months because of dense breast. So we just have to be cognizant of it and not just take it, okay, it's another X-ray, it's another compression. It adds up.
A fascinating